I remember Armistice Day, 1918. They danced on the street. They moved a flat top. I don't know if it was a truck or what it was. No, it wouldn't have been a truck. It must have been just a flat top wagon. Put an orchestra on it in the middle of the block. And they had that orchestra, and they danced in the street, and it wasn't paved street either. And that was Armistice Day, 1918.
World War I fueled a coal boom in the West. The number of miners increased from 26,000 in 1914 to 32,000 in 1921. Production soared, the coal camps surged with activity, wages were high, and prosperity lasted through the early 20s.
What was Trinidad, what was it like?
A booming town in every respect. Interurban streetcars running between a number of the coal camps. CNS Railroad bringing in, CNW Railroad bringing in miners. Stores open till 10 o'clock at night, Saturday night, midnight. A boom town. Lots of business, lots of money.
The time we made 775 was some of the best time of the miners. I tell you why I mean by that. I was making 775, and I put as high as 23 shifts in 15 days. Wow. I bought a brand new Plymouth car, paid it in 3 months, kept a wife and 2 kids, or 3 kids. You try that now. So I said that's the best time we had.
When was that?
That was around in the 20s.
Everything was here. And I suppose largely due to catered maybe to the coal mining interest. They worked hard all week. They wanted to come in, want a little relaxation in Trinidad, and they could find anything they wanted here.
Well, I'll tell you what, we come down on Saturday night. We used to live on the camps, you know. We come down on a Saturday night. Well, we had a little fun, go to beer joint and enjoy ourselves.
Gambling was wide open.
Yeah.
If you didn't want to gamble, you went upstairs and seen the blondes.
And that wasn't a gamble?
No, they didn't bother anybody.
Sure as had the drink if you had the money.
I loaded 16 ton to try to get ahead. It got deeper and deeper in debt instead. Well, they got what I made and they wanted some more, and now I owe my soul at the company store. I loaded 16 ton, now what do I get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, for I can't go. I owe my soul at the company store.
It used to be these coal camps had a personality of their own. Always had a good ball team, always willing to bet on that ball team. On Sundays, they had a great time. Maybe a lot of beer drinking afterwards, and those that had the money would have to set them up, but they lived a fairly good life.
There wasn't all this racial undertone at that time. I know I grew up as the dumb Swede, and I suppose Ernest was the wop, but we never worried about it. I was in his home anytime. I was welcome, and he was in mine. I had friends from south of the border and Slavish people. We had lots of them in Morley, and nobody paid any attention to it.
I was born and reared up here at Morley, about 11 miles up the road, CFNI. And I remember as a young boy, they provided a YMCA for us. They had a little library there, pool tables, bowling alley, a small gymnasium. We had school there up to the 8th grade, and we had balls and bats to play with in the summertime, furnished by the CFNI. And we had field days in the summertime where the whole families get out and come to Central Park. Maybe there's a big baseball game against Valdez, the Valdez Red Sox against Morley and this.
And they had these baseball teams. It was practically salaried teams, all of them, in every coal camp in southern Colorado, and all the superintendents in southern Colorado were managers of these teams, you see. And then they used to compete with one another, see. Then on field day, see, the big field day that they had with the CFNI, they would play it out in Central Park in Trinidad. They had floats from every coal camp that they had, They would bring the floats in and they had bands come in. Oh, they used to build some of the beautiful floats you ever seen. Oh, I'm telling you, they had everything. No fooling.
The strong bonds of community formed during strikes, disasters, and hard times were reinforced in the prosperous years of the 1920s. Ongoing processes of socialization and acculturation united the various nationalities in the company towns. As the older immigrants learned English and became naturalized citizens, their children grew up, attended school, and brought home new American customs. Coal camp marriages fueled the melting pot.
I'm going to tell you that I had one date with my husband before we were married. Believe it or not.
How did you meet?
I was invited to a birthday party up above La Vita, and I met my husband there. And I fell in love. I was 14. And we weren't married for 6 years after that. My mother didn't want me to marry. And we eloped. And when my mother found it out, that was another story.
You met this guy and got married in 1917?
Yeah, 1917. I didn't know him but about 6 months, but he was the only one with an automobile.
Wow.
So he kids me once in a while. He said, "I don't know whether you married me or the automobile." I said, "No, but I met you before I knew you had the automobile." But there wasn't anything slow about him. He might have slowed up since then, but he was right on the job.
How did you two meet each other?
After the war, in the time of the Army of Occupation, and he was the last one of the bunch who went back. So he got fairly acquainted with my daddy, you know. And of course, my mother was always busy, you know, she didn't pay too much attention, but we called him sometime, you know, to have a coffee with us. So. And finally, it looks like he fell in love with me. And he asked my mother, she said, "I would like to take your daughter with me to the United States. I would like to marry her." And my mother told him, "Oh, no, you cannot do that." She said, "No," she said, "there's a lot of nice girls in America, and there's a lot of boys which might..."
She said, "You got American, you got Russian, you got Slavic, you got Italian, you got blah, 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 blah."
She used to didn't want me to go, you know.
Mother, oh, yes.
I was the oldest one. She didn't want to let me go.
How old were you?
I was, I was 21 when I got married. I was 21 when I got married. And that next December, I was going to be into 22 years old.
What kind of courting was there in the mining camps? What did you do? Did you?
Not much. There were just the dances to go to, you know, in the camps,
dances,
in the
movies to
in
go
the camp,
to.
and then we used to go to Berwyn. They had a big dance hall in Berwyn, and then a whole gang would go out there together. That was the extent of our going out and having a good time, really, and going to the shows.
This old piano here worked when silent pictures. It played everybody eating popcorn and talking and everything, and you had to read, you know, Charlie Chaplin and all them old timers, and this played in the old Princess Theater. Oh, this horn, yeah, that belongs to this radio. It was one of the very first ones. That thing was made in 1922. You see, you had to put these earphones on. That's the way that worked. We plugged these earphones in. And It worked real good. I think the first station I heard was Earl C. Anthony. That's where they used to call their call letters in Los Angeles. And then another one is Shreveport, Louisiana. And you couldn't hardly get it over the horn too good. And so at night while we'd plug this in and then you'd listen with these earphones. It was wonderful. They had music and comedy and stuff like that. And that's one of the oldest, 1922, that's when that was made. And there was only about 2 or 3 radios here in Aguilar when I came home with it from Chandler. That's all there was. And I used to have an audience for me every day, every night with the doggone thing. They'd come from everywhere to listen to it, you know, because nobody had it. It was new.
Everybody was real close, you know. All the people in the camp were real close. They were like a big family.
Oh, God.
We all had
Same
good
way here
times.
in Spring Canyon, you know what I mean? They used to have a dance hall they had one up there in Spring Canyon. They had one in Standard. They had one over here at Castle Gate. They had one in Kellersworth, you know, and during Christmas and New Year's, they'd give these big dances, and the people would get together more than they do right now. People don't get together anymore like they used to. Too many TVs and too many cars, you know. We didn't have any TVs or a damn thing at that one time.
There was no such thing as taking in a car and taking off. When they couldn't do that, they was all in together. But it seemed like after the cars, everybody started getting a car. Heck, they don't care about it. They were just get in a car and take off. Heck, a lot of people don't even know their neighbors. I think that's what done it, the car.
We spend more time, you know, visiting one another. And during the summer, you didn't work but 2 or 3 days a week. Well, when we was all good for making home brew and wine and stuff like that, you know what I mean?
Go picnicking.
And then we'd take off in summertime and go fishing. We'd work 2 days a week and then we'd fish about 4 days. Load up with some home brew and everything else, and away we'd go. A little bit to eat.
Most of the Europeans made wine, made their own wine, grape wine, buy grapes from Trinidad and different. And there wasn't any wine allowed. The CF&I wouldn't allow any wine. And then they fought back and forth. And finally, I think there was a law, 200, you had to get a certificate. You only could make 200 gallons of wine a year. So the arguments they had, who made the best wine, you know. That was probably the biggest argument.
It was never really enforced. Every one of those houses in Morley had a cellar built in it, and the only purpose you could see for that thing was just a place to keep the homemade wine. That's what it was for. And they all had it.
You can be sure there were a lot of stills around.
You get all kind of booze, corn whiskey.
Is it good?
Yeah, some of it's good, some of it's root-gut. I remember up there close to my wife's ranch where there was a fellow bootlegging. I even helped her brother and another Spanish kid. We were making booze all night, drinking it all night.
We had all kinds of stills here in Aguilar and all these canyons and things. I remember well some of the stills and things in the raids, and the federal men would come and raid them and chop all their stills all up and break them up and dump all the mash out and all that.
The period from 1915 to 1925 is looked back on as the good times. During the 20s, private automobiles began to be seen in the coal camps, and increased mobility challenged the company store's monopoly. Movie theaters and later radio brought news of the outside world, ending the miners' isolation. For a decade, even without unionization, prosperity might solve some of the coal miners' problems. In 1920, John L. Lewis became president of the UMWA.
Oh, well, Lewis, I had many meetings with him. He worked in the Gallup mine. He worked in the Navajo mine. That's the one east of Gomerco there. He told me he helped drive an entry over there. In fact, he drove a mule in there more than he did that. But he was a tramp driver, what you call a driver. They used to take their equipment and go out and drive mule in the mines, and he worked in the Navajo mine in Gallup. And he also worked at the peanut mine in Crested Butte for about a month.
The year Lewis became president, union members in America, but within 3 years a virulent anti-union crusade cut membership to 3,800,000. The coal strike of 1922 was a disaster in the West, and the union's power was broken. Conditions had not changed in the coal fields, and falling wages during the late 20s ushered in a period of unrest.
2 weeks at that Clayton mine, hand loading, and when they got on taking my stuff off of them and everything I had to pay for it, the mine and their powder and all this junk, 38 cents. I still got the check.
2 weeks.
I went 2 weeks.
Sometimes people went for months and months and never drew any real money. They were indebted to the company star. Ernie's song, I Owe My Soul to the Company Store, was true in Somerset.
I tell you the reason the strikes was, we lived in there. They used to, when you went to work in the camp, they told you had to go live in their company houses. You had to trade the company stores, and they was always higher.
They didn't care whether you made any money or not, and if you didn't trade in the company store, they kicked you out.
When we was loading coal there, why, if we had a 2-ton car and we had, they called them 2-ton cars, a lot of times we'd have 1,500 on that car, 2.5 ton. Well, they'd knock off 1,000 pounds off of it and pay us just for 2 tons, 65 cents a ton.
We were ready to organize with anybody because we figured that we weren't getting the right amount of pay for what work we were doing. And there was so much dead work, what we called dead work, and you didn't get paid for that. You laid your track for nothing, you timbered for nothing.
And if we had a lot of rock in the place, we asked them what they're going to pay us for loading this rock. Nothing.
If a mule skinner killed a mule, why, he got fired. If a man got killed, it didn't make too much difference. They'd bring him in there in the machine shop, as was the morgue there. The company wouldn't even permit witnesses to testify against the company for the purpose of them getting any death benefits or compensation, stuff like that.
The operators refused to recognize the mine workers' union. Safety, fair weight, and company stores remained organizing issues, but after Ludlow, the UMWA could not afford another strike in the West.
And we lost that strike in 1913. And then the IWW come in.
Industrial Workers of the World.
IWW, I want wages, I want work, you know.
We called them just wobblies, and the condition was bad. I was on strike that time, too.
That's in 27.
Rang-a-tang, rang-a-tang, zip-boom-ba. Who in the hell do you think we are? Wobblies, wobblies, ha-ha-ha. We're rough, we're tough, we never take a bluff. Out free speech, we never get enough. Who? We, wobblies, wobblies, wobblies.
I used to see signs down that go down the mine and pass it all over the mine down there about join the wobblies, join the wobblies. From the bottom of the shaft, clean into working faces, see? Had these here posters.
They had men that used to get up on these little platforms, you know, and talk, you know, and they were foreigners, you know, but they never worked in the mines. They never worked in the mines, but they had good oratory, and that's what stimulated the miners.
But they never did bring communist up or nothing. It was just a regular strike, just like the United Mine Workers.
United Mine Workers just didn't care or something. They just didn't figure there was any chance of everybody organizing, or I just don't know why it is that they gave up here. This particular picture was taken when I was recording secretary at the Louisville Local for Industrial Workers of the World. The building was owned by the United Mine Workers of America, but we rented the building. We would organize different committees to go to work and take care of the picket lines and various things that went on. And then we'd also have a little fun. We'd have a dance every once in a while. I know we had children that were organizing. We call them the Junior Wobblies.
Sure.
Yeah, we had just a lot of them, and they were pretty good too. They would get around and help us out as much as they could.
But I was over at the Puritan mine at that time, see, and I was super at the Puritan mine, and I had nothing to do with that, see. All I knew was what was going on, was told, see, but they had us down 100%, see. All we could do was take care of the pumps, allowed to run the pumps, take care of the mules, and that was it. See, they had the northern Colorado out 100%, outside of the Columbine.
What started that strike?
Wobblies coming in. It's a different union altogether than United Mine Workers. Well, my boss come out there, and he told me that they didn't want to sign up with the Wobblies. He said, we're going to have to sign up with the United Mine Workers of America, but we don't want the Wobblies. He said, that's a dynamite bunch. We don't want them.
We shut down every mine in the northern field, but the Columbine. The Columbine's the only one that was
It's the
operating.
one, I guess you've heard about it.
We ate pinto beans for one solid year. Pinto beans. That's what we had. They got so they tasted like strawberries, though. There were some nice people. You're talking to a couple of them now. They're all Erie's full, Lafayette's full that marched on and asked the fellows, don't go down in them mine because we're going to try to win this. We have to. We have to get more. We have to get more for our labor. That's all we've got to sell is our labor. You don't have anything else when you're a working man. You've got your labor to sell.
How about scabs? Did scabs ever get beat up?
Oh, hell, Christ almighty, yeah. Yeah,
You used to catch them on the hill down here and down that county line, you know, they'd be going to the Columbine, that Wobbly strike, pull them out of them cars and just pamp hell out of them and send them home. One time we was in Bill Davis's, you know, saloon drinking, and the Smaldone came in, and we was on strike. What's the matter, you goddamn sons of bitchin' miners? He said, they ain't a-working. I looked him over, I thought, oh, he ain't any bigger than I am much. I'll get you. So he had a beer or two, I didn't say nothing right then. He had 2 or 3 beers and he went back to the bathroom, so I just got up from the booth, told the wife, I said, just stay here a little bit, I'll be back. And where are you going? I said, I'm going back after him. Went in there and he was taking a piss, and I said, say, I said, you made a remark about us coal miners a little bit ago. I said, you son of a bitch, you're gonna pay now. Grabbed him by the collar and the seat of the pants and stuck his head down in the bowl, and boy, you ought to hear him bubble.
Columbine mine was the only mine that was working, and the other mines were all out 100%, but the Columbine mine had miners that were still working, and they just wouldn't give up. So we'd go out to what we call the Boulder-Weld County line, and we would stop all traffic going into the mine to see if these men would go on strike with us, you know.
They told us not to come in that morning, but they'd let us in every morning before that. They give us coffee and donuts. I don't know whether that was bait or what, but when they got us in there, boy, they fixed us good.
Here was these thugs, hired company thugs, waiting for them. Told them they couldn't go in. Well, this is a public road in there. It has to be a public road because there's a post office in there. And all they was going to do was just march through there and ask those people working in that mine to come out on strike with them to help win this 50 cents a day that they desired.
They'd been there time before and then nothing happened. But this morning when they went over there, they was told by Lou Bynum, the sheriff of that district, not to go in that morning.
He begged them, don't go in. Well, they told him we're hungry. We've got to break this strike. We're hungry. So he took 16 silver dollars out of his pocket, this deputy sheriff, and he threw them like that, and they just mobbed one another trying to get a dollar.
But anyhow, they wouldn't listen to Lou. They started over the fence then.
They just went over the gate. When they went over, it was gas pipes and that the thugs had, and they beat all at them right down to the earth. and the others went on carrying that flag.
I saw a lot of rocks being thrown, and the guards were retreating toward what we called a water tank.
When they started over the fence again, the shooting started.
They opened up crossfire with those machine guns.
So I thought perhaps they're just shooting up in the air, but finally I saw a couple of fellows that were right next to me that fell down and they were shot.
There was Bulgarians and everything falling all in front of me and hanging on to me, and I was using my elbows to try and get away from them because everybody for himself, but they're shooting like that at you.
4 or 5 of them guys run behind a house like that, right over there on that corner over there, and they just cut the corner right off of that house with that machine gun.
My brother, Teely Bottinelli, he was injured. He was shot in the foot. And Ernie Zarina, he was another friend of mine, and he was shot in the neck.
And this one little Greek, he worked for me too. I don't know what his name was now. They shot him right between the eyes.
One friend was killed, a fellow by the name of Ray Jacques.
And Nick Spenendikis, there was a big Greek that was killed.
John Estinus, he was shot too. He was driving over at the Puritan mine. And he had a wife and 6 kids. They killed him. Well, there were 6 of them killed that morning.
We didn't have any weapons. They were the only ones that had the weapons, you know, and they had a machine gun up in the tipple.
Captain Wyatt hollered, "Aim!" And we all start running. Why he said fire, I'll never know.
They got big stories out that the miners come with their deer rifles and they was going to take over and all this stuff. That's the biggest lie that anybody ever told in their life, because I know I was right there. Those people never even had a rock in their pocket, man. They left 7 dead ones and 10 shot up. Nobody done one thing about it. Nobody done one thing about it. Those people should have been brought to justice.
And they went over the fence there at the Columbine mine, and them 6 men was killed. The Wobblies, that was the end of the strike. Everybody went to work then. They blew the whistles in the mine the next morning, and by God, the men started showing up for work. And the 2 guys that started that over the fence stuff, they beat it out of there, caught the next train, and went out to Montana somewhere.
I don't know. Actually, I'm going to tell you what I believe in my own mind. Now, I'm telling you personal. This is personal. This doesn't have anything to do with him or any other union man or anybody else. But I think they was hired by the natural gas company to come in here and shut the coal mines down. So the gas, in fact, they run a gas line at that time from right by Erie and went to Brighton with it.
The Public Service Company brought the IWW in here.
Oh, how could they?
Because they wanted the gas lines in here. There was no gas here. No gas, no wrong. But, you know, they was accused of it, and they denied it. See? But Emery was a tool of the Public Service Company. Nobody's ever seen him since. Now, ain't that something? And there was no union here. Of course, you know, when they had the Columbine slaughter, Mrs. Roach, you know, she even gave up she didn't even want nothing to do with her dad. And when she took over the mines, that's when the United Mine Workers came in. She said she would, if the men would go back to work, and I was at the meeting, that they would recognize anything that was affiliated with the American Federation of Labor. So we organized the Columbine Mine, and she paid 25 cents more than anybody else. Company work worked on, and she raised the miners' pay. She paid them for dead work, a little bit, not much. You know, car rock only brought 67 cents. You worked an hour to load that goddamn thing. But you did get the 65 cents, 67 cents, and these other mines wasn't paying it.
The arrival of natural gas lines during the Wobbly strike was a harbinger of social and technological changes which forced miners' wages into a downward spiral. The coal industry was in trouble. Even the union could not keep wages up as consumers switched to other fuels. The huge mines at Dawson, New Mexico had been shipping a trainload of coke per day to the Phelps Dodge copper smelters in Arizona. In 1926, fuel oil furnaces were installed, and the 446 beehive coke ovens at Dawson were shut down. Nearly 20% of the labor force was laid off. Then, in 1928, the Rock Island line switched to diesel power, and the number of miners at Dawson dropped by another 40%. The remaining coal-fired railroads, smelters, and power plants became more efficient. Thus, while in 1910 it took 3.2 pounds of coal to produce 1 kilowatt-hour of electricity, in 1925 that had been reduced to 2.1 pounds, and by 1929 a kilowatt-hour could be produced with 1.68 pounds of coal. In the peak year, 1922, almost 32,000 miners worked in the West. By 1933, the Depression, conservation, and competition from other fuels had reduced the workforce by almost 50%. The Depression began earlier in the coal camps than in the rest of America, but no one knew how serious it would become.
At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they blow their whistle 3 times, and if they blew 3 times, well, then you were supposed to go to work the next day. If they just blew 1 whistle, you didn't work. And of course, the biggest part of the time was just 1 whistle.
They operated as low as 1 day a week.
Wow.
And what the company did then, they didn't charge them rent. They give them their full pay, whatever they had, didn't charge them for the coal. The company was pretty square shooters in those days.
The company gave every piece of land. That was in time, I don't know when was it, the 1929s and 1930s.
The Depression?
The Depression time. They gave us a place so we could plant our gardens over there, you know. And people raised a lot of stuff and put it away, you know.
During the Depression, we can't get job no place. I had a family, so 4 of us got together. And we leased a piece of property from Dr. Chapman up there on a Red Ash, up above our house. We leased it, 4 of us. We didn't have nothing. We had a few dollars, we buy a few rails from CF9, we buy 4 cars, those pit cars, what we load the coal on. I open it myself with a pick and a shovel and a wheelbarrow. That's the truth.
Can't get no way, can't draw no pay. Unemployment getting worse every day. Nothing to eat, no place to sleep. All night long, folks walking the street. Doggone, I mean the panic is on.
The Depression was terrible in 27, 28, 29, and 30. All through the 30s, it just got worse and worse and worse.
Well, the only thing I can tell you was one of the roughest things I ever seen in my life.
Nobody was buying any coal. In fact, they wasn't buying anything.
You couldn't get a job. If you got a job, it didn't pay anything.
You go out there to look for a job, 30, 40 men were looking out there looking for a job.
Just dog eat dog, that's all. You just didn't have anything. That's the whole truth of it. It's just, you didn't have anything, couldn't get anything.
There was no charitable organizations that donated anything, and they didn't run around with food baskets at Christmas and Thanksgiving. There was just no help.
What we wanted to do is keep the darn rent going so we didn't have to sleep outside. So what money I made, I paid rent. And then we lived on gravy and bread.
For widespread unemployment, those still working were suffering wage cuts and deteriorating working conditions. After the 1922 strike, the UMW had withdrawn from the West and was powerless to help the desperate miners.
Coal mining is the most dangerous work in our land today, with plenty of dirty slaving work and very little pay. Coal miner, won't you wake up and open your eyes and see what the dirty capitalist system is doing to you and me? They take your very lifeblood, they take our children's lives, take fathers away from children and husbands away from wives. Oh, miner, won't you organize wherever you may be and make this a land of freedom for workers like you and me?
The American Communist Party organized the National Miners Union as a militant alternative to the United Mine Workers.
The provocation for the NMU was the organization of TUL, the Trade Union Education League, which was trying to enroll members, trying to gain influence in UMW. The guys who organized it didn't like the word dual, but it was a dual union against the United Mine Workers Union because John L. Lewis, who was the overlord of the UMW, was a very autocratic guy, very brilliant guy, who ruled the union ruthlessly. A guy who spoke up against any Lewis policies of the convention had better have double indemnity.
Some of these United Mine Workers, it gets a little radical, and you always find some that's more radical than others. Them guys that's radical, the first thing they accuse them of is communistic ideas.
And many of them were expelled by Lewis. The organization of the NMU was not based entirely on the expulsion, partly on the expulsion, and partly on the conception that it's necessary that the miners won't get anywhere under Lewis, and you've got to have another union.
I thought John L. Lewis sold us out in 1922, and I was a little down on John L. Lewis.
Harlan County, Kentucky became known as Bloody Harlan during the NMU strike in 1931. Violent strikes plagued many industries. To some, it seemed America was on the verge of revolution. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was inaugurated and began to implement his program to get America working again.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
As one of his first acts, FDR signed the NRA to carry the New Deal to labor.
They didn't have no unions around here. Well, they turned around in about 1933, and President Roosevelt came back and gave the miners a right to organize and in a union of their own choosing. Well, a lot of them went into United Mine Workers, and a lot of them went into the National Miners Union, and the National Miners was really the biggest of the two of them.
The United Mine Workers couldn't organize in here and stuff, so this National Miners Union come in here, and there was two unions, see? Well, they started trying to organize.
If you want to join a union as strong as one can be, join the dear old NMU and come along with me. Join the NMU, join the NMU.
We throw that kind of a picket line. We try to stop them from going to work and everything else. That was down around the tipple. They come in there, they started instigating trouble, and finally they raked up a bunch of, they call them gunmen. You know, you got these young kids and everybody else to pack a gun up there. They come up there one day and they were flying the planes around, you know what I mean? They made a raid on us. Gathered us all up and took us down the canyon and throwed us in trucks and stuff, you know, and hauled us down and took us down on into Price and throwed us into what they call, they didn't have the jails big enough, so they got these old buildings and throwed us in these buildings. They call them bullpens.
Then after we got out of the bullpen, that's when they had that strike, that march. Kind of a protest deal is all it was.
Most of the men's wives were part of it too, you know. When they went down to jail, we went down. That's when they held this demonstration down there.
I am a union woman, as brave as I can be. I do not like the bosses, and the bosses don't like me. Join the NMU, join the NMU.
Just before you got to the courthouse, they was up there waiting for us.
I don't think really anybody was too scared because it seemed like people were so united and that everybody just stuck together. That was it.
Then they had this bunch out of Gordon Creek, them women and stuff. Some of them women, you know, them Yugoslavians, they was big women. Old Dragica, you remember?
Yeah, I remember.
Man, she'd get a hold of you by the goddamn neck, buddy. You couldn't get away from her.
They had hoses and tear gas. Tear gas is mostly what raised the devil in the people, you know. United Mine Workers is the ones that carries a big part of the guns down around here. See, one union against the other. And if it wasn't for National Miners Union in them days, I don't think they ever got the United Mine Workers in here, put it that way.
Well, the companies instead of accepting the National Miners Union, they turned around and accepted the United Mine Workers' preference to the National Miners Union, see? But that's how the United Mine Workers actually got in here, was through that deal there, see?
The NMU next organized in New Mexico. Their demand for equal pay for Navajo, Mexican, and Chicano miners struck a responsive chord. As in Utah, the NMU paved the way for the UMW.
Just before I went down there in the 33 strike, the National Miners Union, they called it, which was dominated pretty much by the commies. They came in there and organized, and because the people needed a union so bad, good people followed the leadership there, and they formed a militant union, and they shut down the mines, but they were unable to get contracts. We were just too late getting there because we didn't have the men and people to get in there ahead of these communists, and it left a terrible influence when I went in there. It was quite a situation. There was over 1,200 coal miners in the immediate area within 8 miles of Gallup. And they said, you go organize them. It was quite a problem because of what had happened in the past. There were a lot of good people were in the other movement. And when I came in and says, I'm a United Mine Worker, I immediately became unpopular with the miners on that area. But I like to think down there the Spanish and Mexican people, they were tremendous. We had a lot of Navajos too. We were finally able to get the mines, and we got them organized 100%. One area I had the Mentmore mine. There was about 160 men working out there. And the outside crew, which I suppose is 35, 40, comprised that many people, were all Navajos except the bosses. They lived right in the adjacent area there. And, well, we had to talk to the chiefs and all that to try to get them in. You talk about getting people in. Had a hard time, and I had to come up with a lot of things. We got some of the men in there interested in the union. Their working conditions were bad, and wages very low. And I got to around with these Navajos and finally decided it was in the fall of the year. We had a plan. They were starving to death, really. And funny thing there, they killed a mule in mine. They pulled all the coal with mules. They kill a mule in mine, or break a leg, and they'd shoot him. They'd get word to the Navajos, and you should see what happened when that mule got to the outside the mine. Those squaws would fight over them like you fight over money. They'd have their axes and saws, and they'd cut that animal up in pieces, and in an hour there wouldn't be a piece of that left. The Navajos had a feast. Really. And so I thought that would be a pretty good thing. They'd borrow a 6-shooter and take a 6-shooter in and kill the animal. And they killed quite a few, you know. But anyway, the way we really got the Navajos, I hired a truck. One of the miners there had a truck, and we had a pretty good percentage of the men who thought we were tough enough and big enough to get a contract with this company. And we come over to Farmington, New Mexico, and we bought a couple of truckloads of apples and produce. They raised a lot of stuff in there, and we notified the Indians we were coming in with food for them. We came in there with the food, took it right into the camp. There wasn't a Navajo that worked there, and I think all of their cousins and grandfathers and mothers were there to partake of this, and every one of them signed a union card that day. And the next day we met with the company, and they said, well, I believe you have the majority. I think we'll negotiate a contract with us. Well, we had to sign a sweetheart contract. I did. Because we couldn't no way demand or get a top wage for a Navajo. Not that they weren't probably as good a worker, but they were not dependable. You couldn't ever tell when they're going to be to work, and we just couldn't do it. They were paying them, when I went there, $2 a day every night. They didn't pay Social Security on them. They paid them $2 silver. If they were required to work overtime, they paid them in pop. Yeah, soft drinks. I'm not kidding you.